Why is the face of a man who spent his whole life trying to abolish private business printed on more than 1 billion razor blades? It is a summer morning in 1895 in Brookline, Massachusetts, and King Camp Gillette is standing at his mirror with a razor that will not hold an edge. He is 40 years old, he sold other men's products for 20 years, and despite all of it, he is in debt. But in the next room, on his own desk, sits a book he has already written and published, a book arguing that every company in America should be dissolved into a single one, that competition should be made illegal, and that money itself should be abolished. Yet the thing he is about to build will become the most quietly profitable machine of the 20th century. But it is not the razor. He did not invent the safety razor, and in his first full year of business, he sold 51 of them. Instead, it is 6 years of being told the thing was physically impossible, a chemist who cracked it in a single summer, a war that put his blade into the hand of every American soldier, and a man who died in Los Angeles with almost none of it left. This is new American fortunes, where almost none of them ended the way they began. He was born in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin in January 1855, and the family moved down to Chicago while he was still small. The Gillettes were inventors by temperament. His father George held patents on small mechanical things, and his mother Fanny wrote the White House Cookbook, which sold hundreds of thousands of copies and stayed in print for 50 years. But in October 1871, the Great Chicago Fire took the city, and it took the family's business along with it. His father's shop, his tools, his patterns, and his working models all burned in a single night. King was 16, and he never went back to school. Instead, he went out on the road as a hardware salesman, and he stayed one for the next 20 years. That is the part everyone skips over. Before any of this, he spent 2 full decades on trains, selling other men's products in other men's towns. Yet in the evenings, in hotel rooms across the Midwest, he was writing, not orders and not advertising copy, political philosophy. In 1894, he published it under the title The Human Drift. His argument was that competition is not the engine of progress at all. It is waste, the single greatest source of waste in human history. Every duplicated factory, every rival salesman crossing the same state on the same train, every competing brand of soap was labor spent producing nothing whatsoever. So dissolve them, all of them. Every company in America folded into one corporation, owned in shares by every citizen alive. No competition, no advertising, no money. And then he set out exactly where all of these people were going to live. A single city built beside Niagara Falls and powered entirely by the falls themselves. He called it Metropolis. 60 million people, very nearly the whole population of the United States at the time, housed in one city of identical apartment towers with free light, free heat, and free water pumped in from Lake Erie. One steel mill for the entire country, one shoe factory, one of everything, because a second of anything would be waste. But here is the detail that makes all of it stranger. He was writing this while working as a traveling salesman for the Crown Cork and Seal Company of Baltimore. His boss there was a man named William Painter, who had invented the Crown bottle cap, the fluted metal cap still sitting on beer bottles today. Painter had made a fortune out of it, and he gave Gillette one piece of advice that Gillette would repeat for the rest of his life. Invent something that gets used once and is then thrown away, because then the customer has to come back. The customer has to come back. That is the whole idea, and it did not arrive at a mirror. It arrived instead from a bottle cap, from a boss, as an assignment. So, which version is actually true? The flash of inspiration over a dull razor, or a salesman methodically working a brief he had been handed? Gillette told the mirror version for the rest of his life, and the company printed it on everything. But he told it decades after the fact, in his own publicity, while Painter's advice is documented in both men's accounts. treat the mirror as the polish on a job he had already been given. What is not in dispute is what happened next, which is nothing at all, for 6 straight years. The idea itself was simple enough: a wafer of steel, thin enough to be cheap, sharpened along both long edges, clamped into a handle, and thrown away the moment it dulled. But every expert he took it to told him that it could not be made. Steel thin enough to be disposable could not be hardened properly, and hardened steel that thin would buckle the instant you ground an edge onto it. Metallurgists at MIT told him so to his face. Yet he kept going anyway. Despite 6 years of work and most of the money he had, by 1900 he owned a drawer full of drawings and no product at all. And nothing changed until he found William Emery Nickerson. Nickerson was an MIT-trained chemist, and he had already turned this project down once. But he took it the second time, and he did not solve the blade. Instead, he solved the machine that made the blade, a way to harden the wafer while holding it flat, then grind it without letting it warp. The American Safety Razor Company was incorporated on the 28th of September 1901 and was renamed for Gillette himself soon afterwards. Production finally began in 1903. In that first year, the company sold 51 razors and 168 blades. 51. 6 years of work, every dollar he had, and 51 customers. How does a man walk back into a boardroom with that number? Yet the following year, the company sold 90,884 razors and 123,000 blades. But nothing about the product itself had changed. Nickerson's machinery had simply started running properly, and the price of a blade had fallen far enough that throwing one away stopped feeling like vandalism. Because that was always the real barrier, and it was never engineering. It was a habit. A razor in 1890 was an heirloom, passed from a father to a son. You stropped it and you honed it, and if you could not, you paid a barber to do it for you. But Gillette was not selling a sharper blade at all. He was asking a grown man to throw good steel into a bin, and then to do the same thing again the following week. The razor cost $5, which was close to a full week's wages for a working man. The blades themselves cost pennies. And there is the thing his name is still attached to. Sell the handle once, then sell the blade forever. Printer cartridges, coffee pods, games consoles, every one of them runs the model that a utopian socialist built to pay for a world without money. If a company quietly inventing a habit and then selling you the cure is the sort of story you want more of, subscribing is what keeps these getting made. His own face went onto the packet, trademarked, the mustache, the signature, the whole head. By the 1910s, King Camp Gillette's portrait was among the most widely reproduced human faces on Earth, sitting in millions of bathrooms, yet almost nobody who looked at it every morning knew whose face it actually was. Then came the war, and the war changed the arithmetic entirely. In 1917, the United States entered it, and the Army made a decision about gas masks because a mask cannot seal against a beard. So the government bought Gillette sets for the whole force. In 1918 alone, the company sold 3.5 million razors and 32 million blades. And when those men came home, they simply carried on shaving. They had been issued the habit at government expense, and the blades were still on sale. So the clean-shaven American face is not a fashion that drifted in. It was manufactured, and there is a purchase order for it. By now, he had all of it: the fortune, the factories, and his own face on the packet in every bathroom in the country. Yet in 1910, he sat down and wrote another book. World Corporation was not a novel and not a daydream. It was a prospectus, a genuine proposal to incorporate a company whose stated purpose was to absorb every other company on Earth. He needed a president for it, so he offered the job to Theodore Roosevelt, along with a fee of $1 million, but Roosevelt declined. In 1924, he tried once more, publishing The People's Corporation with help from the muckraker Upton Sinclair. Almost nobody read it. Here's the part that is genuinely hard to hold in your head. This was not a youthful phase, and he never took a word of it. The man selling $5 razors on a model built to take a small payment off you every week believed at the same time and in public that the entire system he was winning at ought to be torn down. But the company was already slipping away from him, in boardrooms rather than in markets. Control passed to a director named John Joyce, and Gillette kept the name and the title while having steadily less say in anything. So he put his money into land instead, Californian ranches, orchards, and a house out at Palm Springs. But then 1929 arrived and took the land, the orchards, and most of the stock with it. He died in Los Angeles on the 9th of July, 1932, at 77, with his affairs in trouble and Metropolis unbuilt. In 2005, Procter & Gamble bought the Gillette Company for about $57 billion, the largest sum ever paid for a consumer goods business anywhere. But the face came off the packet decades ago, and hardly anyone now can tell you that there was ever a man called Gillette. Which brings us back to that mirror in Brookline in 1895, and a 40-year-old salesman with a dull razor and a book nobody would print twice. He got exactly one of the two things he wanted. He built a single company that reached into nearly every household on Earth and took a small payment from each of them, forever. But he never did get to own it in common. So, tell us what you shave with and what it costs you over a year. That number is the thing he was really selling.